Excellent. So what we're going to ask you to do is how do you use the street? Okay, and you can choose a couple answers here, 2 or 3, and we're going to let you just fill this out, and then in about a minute we'll take a pause, and we just want to understand what people how you use the street. Get to work, go to a shopping or dining opportunity, recreational trip. Are you traveling to and from other destinations? Again, this is not going to be statistically significant, but we just want to know the people that are participating tonight, really, how are you using the street? So we got 78% of you have participated so far. It's a neat little feature of Zoom. We'll wait 10 or 15 more seconds. All right. You know what you can see from this chart for the results, again, just an informal survey, is that 83% of the respondents use the road to travel to or from other destinations.
We can't see the results.
Oh, you can't see the results? Okay.
Okay, now we can.
Now you can. Okay, great, great. Then how did I know that? I guess, but it's true. 83% of folks are traveling to or from other destinations. About 70% to dining or shopping opportunities, and then about 50% recreation. That's interesting. And then we're seeing very similar responses for working, and about a third commuting to and from work, and then other trips. We have one more question we're going to ask. Let's pull that one down next, Jen. All right. Now we want to know, for all those who are participating tonight, select your 2 major ways you use the street for traveling, either by walking or cycling, in a car, or via public transit, or some other means we can't think about right now. Again, this is not statistically significant. We just want to have a good feel for what folks are doing that are participating in this meeting tonight. All right, let's give it another 10 or 15 seconds. All right, let's pull the results up. Okay, lo and behold, almost 90% response rate for driving. Obviously, it's a principal arterial roadway. There's lots of traffic on it. We'll talk about that in a moment. But a good chunk of you use this street primarily as a way, to drive along in your car. High response for walking along or across the street, or cycling along it too, 35 to 40%. Again, these don't add up to 100% because they're allowing you to choose more than one. We do have some public transit riders. There are several bus stops and bus routes along the street, and then others. So thank you very much for participating in this poll. We have another one coming up later during this presentation, and this is really helpful for us. Let's go back to the presentation, Jen. All right. Great. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the background along the street. As many of you probably are aware, there's really poor pavement conditions along McDowell between Redwood Highway and Sunrise. And a few years ago, phase 1, which is the segment, the most northern segment or western segment between Old Red and Corona, was approved by the city, and it's included in the city's capital improvement plan, which is CIP, for about $5 million worth of improvements. So there is $5 million available. Fortunately, $5 million doesn't go along as far as we'd like it to. So that's why we're having our meeting tonight, but we'll cover repaving of that segment shown in yellow. The city is going to be seeking additional funds for improvements and enhancements in the area shown in purple between Corona and Sunrise. as well as for active transportation improvements. And those are things such as better crosswalks, bikeways, things we can do for buses, et cetera. And we're going to share with you a toolbox of those types of measures tonight. And we want to get your feedback on what could make sense and should be considered for phase 2. Next slide, please. This simple chart is to show you the different phases of a capital improvement project, primarily a roadway project such as North McDowell, and where we are right now. There has been a lot of planning that has gone on. Again, looking at existing conditions that we're going to share with you tonight, doing some topographical surveying to understand where property lines are and flow lines and utilities. Also, just to get that initial $5 million budget, that was important to do as part of the planning phase. And of course, coordinating with other agencies, because we got transit agencies, we got utility districts and whatnot. So that's all done in the planning phase. We're right between the planning phase and the design phase right now. Initial design will continue on that northern segment, but we also want to start doing design on the southern segment and start considering other active transportation projects that could be included. So this is the perfect time to work with the community, understand, are we getting it right? Do we understand the issues? And what should it be considered in addition for the project? And then after that is done, and it goes through several cycles of design, it incrementally gets further and further refined until we have final design plans and can go to construction. And we're hoping that phase 1 of the construction can start this summer, later this summer. Next slide, please. So here's what we know about existing conditions. Later, we want to hear from you about things we're missing or that we need to hear about. McDowell's a very interesting street. Historically, had a lot of farmland and industrial uses along it. It has evolved slowly but surely to a variety of uses, including hotels, restaurants, all kinds of service places along it, business parks. We have breweries, of course. There's also senior housing, single family homes, mobile home parks, apartment complexes. In fact, the next map on the next slide shows you the different zoning along North McDowell. And you can see lots of different colors here. And each of those different colors is a different types of land use designation. So the street has become, over time, a roadway with lots of different uses, a lot of different travelers, and heavy traffic along, which we'll talk about in a minute. Next slide, please. We've counted traffic. There is a lot of traffic on North McDowell. There's over 20,000 vehicles on an average weekday traveling along the street. And that's over time, that's caused a lot of wear and tear on the street. The pavement's in really cruddy shape and high priority for the phase 1 type of improvements. Next slide, please. Here you go. You can see the poor pavement conditions right within these photos here. Lots of cracking. It's been falling apart. I'm sure you can feel it, all you drivers, when you're on this street and how uneven the surface is. The longer the city waits, the more expensive it becomes to redo the surface. So this is a major part of the first phase of the street improvement. Next slide. Pedestrian conditions. Here's some additional photos. You know, we try to get photos of pedestrians, but there's not as many as we would expect. And I think we know why. There's a lot of locations where we're missing sidewalks, or the crosswalks are located a long ways apart. Next slide, please. A lot of the curb ramps at the corners are not in compliance with the American with Disabilities Act. That will need to be done as part of the improvements. You can see some sidewalk gaps here. On some parts of the street, there are locations where we have utility poles and other impediments that really make it narrow or just not inviting as a pedestrian to walk along. Next slide, please. Stepping back on the phase 1 segment, there's 4 traffic signals, and you can see, but with these little black lines here, there's not a lot of crosswalks, marked crosswalks to get across the street. So we want to hear from you today about that as well. Where are some locations that are important to you where you want to cross? Good planning usually has crosswalks every 200 or more feet from each other, but we have long gaps along the street where we're missing crosswalks. Next slide. We have a lot of cyclists here tonight as well, and there are places along the street that has bike lanes, as you can see on the left, but then they just end. Or on the right, where the bike lanes are really only separated by a thin white stripe. So we're looking for opportunities as well to make it safer for cyclists riding along the roadway. Next slide. And I mentioned public transit earlier. There's a few folks that are here tonight that do use public transit services along and across North McDowell. A number of bus routes have historically served the corridor. Some have been discontinued during COVID. But you can see here they include the Petaluma transit routes, Sonoma County transit routes, and Golden Gate as well. So a lot of service. Some of the transit stops, though, are not as attractive or don't provide full amenities as I think some folks would like. We've heard that, and we'd love to hear more about that tonight, particularly from those of you who do use transit or have used transit along North McDowell. Next slide. And of course, SMART plans a new station here at Corona Road. Funding, as my understanding, has not been secured for that station yet, but that planning will occur along with North McDowell improvements. We've taken a look at reported crashes, and as we know, typically for every crash or collision that's reported, there can be 2 or 3 that are not reported. So this is what we know from crash records over a 5-year period from January 1st, 2016 till December 31st, 2020. On the northern segment, there's about 65 collisions that resulted in injuries. That's pretty high for roadways of this type. So that is concerning to us. We know that half of those are a result from the police records of unsafe speed or what are called right-of-way violations, where motorists went across turn left across a crosswalk where there was a pedestrian or broadsided another vehicle. So those are the primary causes of collisions. We also know that of all those who've been hit or in a collision, 17% have been the most vulnerable users, that is pedestrians and cyclists, as shown in the pie chart here on the right. Next slide, please. Jen, my partner here, plotted out all these collisions that have been reported in that 5-year period. Again, this is just between Old Red and Sunrise, and you can see by the color of the circle what the collision involved. So for instance, up near Old Redwood Highway, a lot of congestion there. We have a lot of vehicular collisions that have occurred there. Corona signalized intersection, several there as well, but also a bicyclist in that case. And in many places in between, you're seeing pedestrian or bicycle collisions as well on this corridor. So we keep a close eye on these. We'll dive deeper to understand exactly what the cause and who was involved in each of these types of crashes. But if you've had any experiences in a crash or near miss, and you want to share that with us tonight, we'd love to hear about it. Next slide, please. During that planning stage I was mentioning, we have heard a lot. The city's gotten a lot of email and feedback on how the street works or doesn't work. And here's just some things we've heard. As I mentioned previously, gaps in the sidewalk, lack of crosswalks, really poor bike access. The pavement surface, as we all know, that's one of the primary reasons we're here tonight, is in really bad shape. Transit access is lacking. I talked about the curb ramps and even the sidewalks that don't meet ADA or Americans with Disabilities Act requirements. Trees are not in good shape in certain areas of the street. There's poor wayfinding. What that means is it's hard to understand where to go. Maybe the signing could be improved. And then last, there's been some folks who said, wait a minute, speeds are just way too high. It'd be great if we could calm the traffic speeds along this arterial road. Next slide, please. All right, I want to next talk about, and again, this meeting is all about hearing from you folks, but we want to explain some different types of tools that the city can consider. And again, we want to get your feedback. This is just a short, this is a small toolbox I'm going to explain tonight. There's other tools that are available as well. And these are things that we implement to make streets more complete. And that is be able to serve as many users and different user types as possible, including different ages, different abilities for walking or biking, driving, of course, and then also public transit users. So Jen, if you don't mind, we're gonna quickly go through a bunch of different types of tools and talk about some of their applications. Of course, there's high visibility crosswalks. Crosswalks you can really see, and not just crosswalks, but maybe more of them or key locations that we should be thinking about as part of this project. And of course, there's ways to make crosswalks as more safe than just being a marked crosswalk, through good signing or through flashing beacons. And of course, you've seen what are called rectangular rapid flashing beacons throughout the city. These are places where you push the button and the lights flash and really alert the driver that there's a pedestrian at crosswalk and they need to yield to that driver. So these are things that can be considered as part of this street improvement project. There's also another type of pedestrian treatment called a pedestrian hybrid beacon. And this is more like a traffic light in that it turns red, it flashes red. Motorists have to stop. The pedestrian gets a walk light, so they're even more protected compared to a beacon. Of course, it does hold up traffic for a little bit of time. So there's some pros and cons about these, but at major crossings, these can certainly make sense. The bottom photo is a person that is in a ADA compliant curb ramp. And when I mean that, it's not just the yellow truncated domes, but it's also the slopes and grades of those ramps so that they are not too steep and that they are comfortable for users that are in perhaps in wheelchairs or visually impaired, et cetera. So these are things that we are required, are going to do that no matter what as part of the street repair. We also know that as the street has evolved, not all the sidewalks have been completed, and there are several gaps along the roadway segment of McDowell. So we'd like to hear from you tonight also about where priorities should be for filling those gaps, if not as part of the phase one, but as part of the future phase of the project. McDowell is also quite wide in areas, and there could be the opportunity to provide median treatments in the middle of the street, perhaps landscape, but also opportunities to provide refuge areas so that pedestrians can cross the street in two stages, against one stream of traffic, take refuge in the middle of the street, so there's better sight lines between a motorist and a pedestrian, and then cross to the other side of the street. And by the way, these work really well with some of the beacons and pedestrian signals that I explained just a few minutes ago. So these are things too we'd love to consider and hear about from folks tonight. Excuse me. Of course, we've also heard that there's a need to separate and provide protected facilities for cyclists who are riding in each direction along the street. The top photo here shows a bike lane that is buffered. So it actually has more separation than just a 4 or 6 inch white stripe. And the bottom photo shows what's called a multi-use path or a shared use pathway, which is typically separated from the roadway and used by cyclists and pedestrians of all ages. So limited opportunities we feel along the street for implementation of multi-use path, but some locations where it could be possible. So again, we want to get feedback on that tonight. Next slide, please. Excuse me. And then finally, the general concept of calming the street altogether. We have heard from folks, and we know from the collision statistics that speeding is an issue and can be an issue along North McDowell. So there's a potential to look at things such as narrowing the lanes a bit to try to get the speeds to within the speed limit, or other traffic calming ideas that I described earlier. They can be things such as extending curbs into the street to shorten pedestrian crosswalks, and other types of treatments that can be considered, again, to really try to get the speeds at the most reasonable level while still maintaining the capacity of the roadway. Well, I told you I was going to get through that pretty quick because this isn't about us. It's really about what the project is and what it can be, and hearing from the community. And we're going to do, in a few minutes, we're going to open it up to your observations. Again, we want to hear from you about what works, what doesn't work, and what you'd like to see the street evolve into in this next iteration. But first, we're going to do another quick poll that we'd like you to fill out. Okay, Jen, go ahead. Pull up the poll. All right. So again, we're going to ask you to give us more specifics later, but we'd love to hear right away, what would be your main priorities for North McDowell? And in this case, select up to 3, and we'll come back in a moment to see where you're at. Just give it another 15, 20 seconds. Okay, we have lots of folks have responded. Over 40 people have responded, and I think now we'll share with you what we are seeing from this unscientific survey. Are the results up for everybody? Okay, great. Well, there you go. Look at that. So I'm going to start with the highest responses first. Again, these don't add up to 100% because many of you selected 2 or 3 responses. But biggest response was making it easier to bike along the roadway. And then right behind that was to walk along it and to increase traffic calming or provide traffic calming and increase safety. Lesser degree was restore the pavement, which about 50% of the folks responded to. And then just a quarter said to reduce traffic congestion. So far and away from this, again, informal poll, we're seeing really the desire to make the street more friendly for cyclists and pedestrians and improve safety along the roadway. So thank you very much. Look forward to hearing from you as we go through the next part of the presentation where you guys are providing your feedback. So let's move on. And I'm going to remove the poll here. All right, so most of you or many of you have probably been using Zoom for work or for in your personal life or for other purposes. But tonight, what we're going to ask you to do is to follow the instructions here to raise your hand to speak. And so what you need to do is, you can see on the slide here, hit *9 if you're calling on your phone, or you just hit this reaction button on the very bottom right of your screen, and then click raise hand, not thumbs up or other emoticon, but raise your hand. And we're going to have, who's it going to be, Ingrid or?
Jessica.
Jessica, excellent. Jessica is going to call on you as you raise your hands, and just please be patient. We're going to ask folks again to, next slide, to really tell us your experience, about traveling along the street, what works for you, what doesn't work for you, what you'd like to see along the street, and generally also what do we need to know? Because I just gave a 20-minute presentation. It was super fast, but we want to make sure we're catching and we understand how the street works and doesn't work for you. So with that, maybe we can move this screen off and just have all of our faces back on and use the reaction thing to select folks and hear from people. And by the way, if there's some questions, we'll try to answer. We got a lot of folks here tonight from the city. And if we can't, we'll just take some notes and get back to you. So go ahead, Jessica.
Okay, hi everybody. So I see about 8 hands raised right now, and I'm just going to go down how they're listed on my participants list. And we're really excited to hear from you. And I would just ask if we can, we definitely want to hear everything you have to say, but if we can, just in the interest of everybody getting back to their evening, keep it somewhat succinct, that would be wonderful. We're not putting a time limit or anything, but just something to keep in mind. So first, Dan Light.
Thank you. Just 2 things. I have biked along there occasionally, and I would really like to see bike lanes along the whole thing rather than the broken up sidewalk or not that it is now, and a reasonable connection from the Lynch Creek Trail onto the road or the shopping centers at either side. Right now you come off that trail and you're dropped on the sidewalk with utility poles in the middle of it, and it's just awful. And the other is I would love it if we could consider maybe a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit and really design that road for safety and multi-use first. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dan. Next, Colin McDowell.
Hi, my name's Colin. I am the co-founder of Hen House Brewing Company. We're up on North McDowell. I have to put in just the strongest ask for more safety, particularly when it comes to speeding on McDowell. We had someone killed in front of our business in August of 2020 because of a speeding accident. And it was unnecessary. It was traumatic for the folks who were working here that day. And I would really love to see the street become safer such that that's not a thing I need to get on here and bum everybody out with talking about. So I just, I would, whether it's traffic calming, lower speed limits, a crosswalk between this side of McDowell and the other side of McDowell, somewhere between here and Lagunitas, I don't really care. But what I do care about is that we shouldn't be having traffic fatalities on North McDowell. That's just not a thing that should happen. So that would be the request I'd like to put in at this meeting.
Okay, thank you, Colin. Janice Cater Thompson.
Janice, you're muted. Thank you. I want to talk about truck routes. You have a lot of trucks. You have probably at least 200 trucks going to the post office daily. And a lot of those get off at Washington Street. And if they stayed on the freeway and getting off at Old Redwood Highway, you'd have a lot less congestion down in the lower area from Corona south. And there, it's not just the post office, it's a lot Lagunitas, it's a lot of the businesses up in that area. And it seems like a simple thing that the city could actually work with the businesses to accomplish before the road is even, whatever happens with the road. My big issue is the ADA, all the poles in the road. You can't, if you're in a wheelchair, it's very dangerous. But, and then the other thing is, just the speeding and the noise and the pollution caused by cars and trucks. I mean, you have, I don't know what happened with mufflers, but they're like, back as loud as they could be. And, you know, these are things that I would really like the police to get more involved in. But the speed of the roadway is 40 miles an hour and it really needs to be reduced. I'd love to see this made into a true boulevard that was choked down and made safer, because it's extremely dangerous. And I live very close to this area and the noise level's gone up probably 100% in my time. Thank you very much. And I'm sure I have more and I will write it in the chat. Thanks.
Hey, Jessica, can I step in here? Thanks for those
Yeah, please.
Thanks for those comments. I think you also commented on the chat, and everyone feel free to add your comments into the chat as well. I think what we'll do near the end is go through those. Anybody hasn't spoken up, we'll just read through the chat and go through those as well. Okay, thanks.
Okay, great. Thanks, Janice. Thanks, David. Next, John Shrimps.
Thank you. Yes, I'm for both driving and for bicycling. I avoid that stretch as much as possible at the last couple of years because of the number of potholes and things just for the cars. Also in bicycle riding, I felt very unsafe going down there with the cars passing by, large trucks and the like, and the amount of crisscrossing that's going on in industry. My son worked at Solar City when the building was there, would go across the street to Hen House or back or at Petaluma Hills Brewery and then back to Lagunitas. And I've seen large numbers of people crossing very unsafely in that whole section, trying to get across and running across and cars passing by. So that section needs maximum pedestrian crossing abilities right in that section because there's a lot of folks out there have had already a few beers. And then just reading what was been said before, I think you seem to be on track for everything. The bike lanes need to be wider and safer for the most part, but just the general plan, the whole area, not just the road itself, but really need to rethink if a train station's going in down there for the smart train, I want to be able to ride my bike down that road, go to the train station, get on, and then go north somewhere. I'd like to be able to ride and go down the Redwood Highway and enter. Right now I'm using Eli to access. I'm coming in from Sonoma Mountain. I drive down, I go and I cross over to Eli, go out to the main road there, Redwood Highway heading out. And that road, a lot of traffic has now bypassed McDowell and moving on Eli. And there's cars on this little 2-lane road. I have about 2 foot of space and there's cars whizzing by me at 50 miles an hour. And they're entering the other lane of the other road just to get by me because they're avoiding McDowell down there. They're using Eli instead. So I'd like to see some of that relieved in combination. And then the other thing to think about is as we electrify our cars, we need to rethink our transport. I just came from a meeting today on transportation and the number of electric cars that need to be produced. And I've done a lot of research on mini cars, electric bikes, scooters, fancy tricycles, motorcycle type vehicles. They're coming. They're going to be here within 10 years. We're going to have large numbers, and they might not be as fast as the F-150 trucks going down to 50 or the big trucks. So even think about a 2-lane system going each way, one of which can be the major trucks and cars that are going fast, but another lane right between the bicycles that's for the slower electric vehicles coming down the lane. So be thinking about how to incorporate that. And then changing the whole area down there, because why would we go down there with a bicycle? Why travel? There's not much there. If I'm going there, if I'm going shopping, I need a car to carry it back. If I'm going to walk down there, again, it's too far to walk to do any of things that I want to do. So it's a mishmash of so much stuff, and it's improving a little bit with the breweries, but I'm really concerned about the reason to go down in that area. And it really needs to be revamped entirely as far as the zoning and the type of buildings and what we actually do down there. So that needs to be included in the plan, not just the road. So those are my recommendations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. Jean?
Hi, everyone. I am commenting as someone who has lived in this area for over 20 years. I'll try to keep my comments brief. One of the recommendations that I have, or I think it was mentioned earlier that we have, sidewalks, but we don't see a lot of people walking on them. And just to respond back to that, the air quality is with all of the cars and the traffic, it's not really healthy to walk along North McDowell with all of the cars. Like when you walk along that way, you can feel, you know, the air quality. And it's not somewhere that you feel safe walking. On the way to the post office, the sidewalk just ends at one point. As someone who drives along this way frequently, I get nervous. I don't know how to ride a bike, but I get nervous for bicyclists because of how small the bike lanes are. They're pretty much non-existent. And then another comment I have is the crosswalk where Sunrise Parkway is. We have a lot of families who come up to walk along Sunrise Parkway. I see families there all the time walking, you know, with their kids, with their pets. But then when it gets dark, especially with daylight savings, it's really hard to see people crossing, and it just doesn't feel as safe. So I noticed one of the suggestions in the PowerPoint was one of those, I don't remember what's called, but one of those red lights that kind of slow things down. I think that would be great there. Just to help families feel safe and wanting to be outside and spend time with their families. And I had a couple other comments, but I am not remembering them right now. So I'll just put them in the chat when I do remember. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jean. Nancy Chien Erickson.
Hi, I live on Eli Road and just off of it and near by Corona. And I've been here at 33 years. And I do like to ride my bike, but I don't find it pleasant to be on McDowell. So I mean, the other side of Sunrise Parkway, you know, it's off the road, so that's okay. But it would be great if there is space to put some kind of a bike lane or bike path there that's not right next to the traffic. I think it would be a lot more pleasant. However, since I live off of Corona, I probably wouldn't be riding my bike all the way over to Old Redwood Highway, unless it were someplace that where I really felt safe there. I do remember driving towards Old Redwood Highway and seeing people run across the road from Lagunitas to Hen House, and it was scary. It just kind of reminds me of like people crossing 101 at now south of San Diego. So it would be great to have something there, maybe even an island like you have that refuge there. I just don't know how many people do cross there, but I can understand how it can be so tempting. And then for me personally, because I live off of Eli, I have to turn there all the time. I mean, I go through that intersection sometimes 4 times, sometimes 6 times, sometimes 8 times a day. So I would love to see a right turn lane from northbound on McDowell to turn right onto Corona. There, I have a small car, but it's still not quite good enough to fit in there. So I have to wait for the green light to go when everyone's going straight and I want to turn right. So if there's some way of widening that a little bit, that would be great. I know that there are power poles, and I wrote this to your engineer, Mr. Eistat, but I would think it would be great especially if there's going to be a train station there, and there's a lot more housing that's going to be there. So, and then I have this other personal kind of a beef. I keep a post office box. It was for my business, like for personal things, and so I have to go there pretty often. And to turn, you have to turn right out of the post office, and that means that you have to cross through 10 lanes. because you have to cross over the lanes that are on McDowell and then cross over onto the side street and turn around in those 2 lanes and then come back. And then to get back to onto Corona Road, I have to cross 3 more lanes on McDowell. So, and I had written that it's after 9 p.m. There's so little traffic there by the post office. And I would just wish that we could have a sign that would say that you don't have to go across, and that you can turn left there, like after 9 p.m. or between 9 p.m. and 5 a.m. or something like that. Just so I don't have to do that long crossing over through all that traffic or through all those lanes. So those are what I would request if that's a possibility. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. Next, Nancy Mosk.
Okay, hi. I just have a couple of things about crosswalks and sidewalks. I live in Petaluma Estates, mobile home park, and it would, we really need to have a crosswalk that is pretty much directly across from the park, and relative to the how close it is to Corona. I understand you have a guideline how many, what the distance can be between different crosswalks, but my feeling is that pretty much in front of Petaluma Estates, but near where the train tracks crisscross McDowell, would be possible. It's my suggestion. Then a couple tiny things. One, I'm a runner and walker. I go down McDowell practically every day as a pedestrian. And right where the tracks cross McDowell, which on the west side where the tracks cross, the asphalt is really uneven right next to the tracks.
Mhm.
And it's a hazard. It's easy for someone to trip. That's something that, I mean, I had talked to smart people about. I talked to city council, and now this goes back several years, but that's something that I really feel needs to be fixed. And then the third thing is that's critical is actually, I guess it's in the area between Sunrise and Rainier, so maybe that's your phase 2 area. On the east side of McDowell, there's a paved crosswalk, and just adjacent to that, there's an asphalt, and that that's in terrible shape. I actually happened to trip there once, as my doing, I understand, but still it's a hazard. And I also noticed that at each intersection where there's one of those signs painted indicating that area is for cyclists. It's not safe for a walker, a runner, or a cyclist. So just putting it out there is something that I think is really critical. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nancy.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. Ann Edminster.
Hey, I have a list here. I'm speaking both as a private resident and as a chair of Petaluma's Climate Action Commission, and want to preface the rest of my comments with the remark that we must see a significant shift in use of various transportation modes over the decade ahead if we're going to meet our climate goals. And that means we will have many, many more bicyclists and walkers than we presently do now. And if we're going to make it safe for them, it's absolutely critical that we rethink the priorities for this and all of our city streets. So with that in mind, there are a lot of things that need to happen in order to change that from an environment that's extremely hostile now to cyclists and pedestrians to one that is inviting and really encourages and supports pedestrians and cyclists. Also echo John Tribb's comment about smaller, more electrified transportation as well. It needs to be safe for those types of modes too. So we need tree planting, significant tree planting for shade cover. We need cool pavement coatings there. We need retention areas for rainwater retention and infiltration. We definitely need calming. We need slower speeds. We should have class 4 bike lanes or separate bike paths. And I'm actually kind of surprised at the omission from your toolbox of the 4 to 3 lane conversion, which I think is potentially an excellent solution there. It works quite well on Petaluma Boulevard and would like to see that adopted more widely. And finally, want to point to the recommendations of the National Association of City Transportation Officials, which are embodied in their publication titled City Limits, where they provide a lot more detail on how to provide a safer environment for all modes, and particularly the most vulnerable modes. Thanks very much.
And thank you, Anne, for mentioning some additional tools that I didn't provide in the toolbox. Certainly, I mentioned that there's many more than we had time to go through tonight, including what you mentioned was a 4 to 3 road diet or reallocating the lanes, and some other tools that are available from NACTO, which is the National Associated City and Transportation Officials, that offers lots of different ideas for traffic calming tools. So these are things that will be considered. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, David. Thank you, Anne. Next, we have Colleen Barclay.
Hi, thanks. I moved back to Petaluma. I lived here for almost 30 years, and then I was gone for the last 10 years living in North Carolina, where I became very involved in local transportation advocacy. And when I moved back here a little less than a year ago, because when I would visit every year, I wasn't on a bike. You know, I didn't bring my bike with me. And when I came back and started trying to ride around town for transportation and recreation, I was shocked at what a bike unfriendly environment this place that I love either always was, or I had gotten used to a different environment. I mean, North Carolina of all places, right? You wouldn't necessarily expect it to be further along. So everything that everyone has said tonight, I completely support. The traffic calming, actual infrastructure, I think is super important, because we just reduce speeds. Enforcement is never enough to make people actually slow down. And especially on a big wide road, there people are just going to drive fast. So anything you can do to make it sort of psychologically uncomfortable for people to go too fast. More crosswalks, I totally support. I think it's important that in addition to like the alert blinky business, that it's they need to be very well lit, because pedestrians are at high risk at night in crosswalks, you know, even in crosswalks, unless they're extremely visible. Bike lanes, someone else mentioned protected bike lanes, and I'd like to, you know, I didn't see it in the tools that were presented. To me, some stripes of paint on the street are not protection, but you know, without going all the way to a multi-use path, which might take up more, you know, more street profile room, you know, maybe consider things like a curb between traffic and the bike lane, or bollards, you know, just something that creates, and again, in some ways that's more of a psychological barrier. You know, if someone's like, if a drunk driver is gonna take you out, they could do it through the bollards, but the vast majority of drivers are going to pay a lot more attention to a physical barrier like that than they are to paint on the street. That's all. Thanks for holding this, and I'm happy to see this sort of thing going on.
Sorry, trouble with my mute button. Thank you, Colleen. And next, Jerry Wilkinson. Jerry.
Yes, sorry, I took so long. Thank you. I want to acknowledge the comments from John Shribs and Edminster. I think those really hit it on the head. That's exactly what we need to rethink what this area is and what it needs to be, to get into smaller electrical vehicles, as he said. And as far as the bicycle goes, we need full bike lanes there, class 1 or class 4. You know, as I listen to this, and with all due respect to the presenters, it strikes me as a very auto-centric idea, and I think we have to get away from that. Climate change is real, and we need to embrace that. We need to give it a big hug. We have a carbon neutral goal by 2030, and we have to go after that. So I think the focus needs to be away from the automobile and what works and suits the automobile, and more towards alternate modes of transportation, which primarily in this case would be the bicycle, pedestrians. We all know there's broken sections of sidewalk there. That should be, you got to fix that. This should be a very nice boulevard. And the other thing that strikes me in all of this is we're going from Old Redwood to, what is the Sunny Side, I think his name. But what is the destination in there? Yeah, I think this thought needs to be given, and of course you can't do it now, but planning to continue all the way down to Washington, from Washington down to Lakeville. We need a network of bicycle pathways throughout the city. So I mean, it's a start, but I really think we need to get away from any of this whole thing being based on what suits the automobile and flip that around. So that's pretty much what I have to say. But I appreciate it. I do want to acknowledge again what Mr. Schreiber and Ms. Administrator said, because I think that's really the direction we need to be headed. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jerry. Next, 957168. Hi, you're muted.
Yes.
There we go.
I'm Bob Ulmer, and I live in Petaluma Estates, which is just a little bit south of Corona Road. And as I was sitting here tonight, listening to everybody, I could feel a vibration from the 18-wheelers running by. And this is a huge problem. They're beating up the street. And because my manufactured home is sitting on piers, that's just the way it is. I get a lot of vibration from these trucks, and it's just, and they're, you know, some of them are going 40 miles an hour and some of them are going a lot faster. So I heard something on the radio a while back that there's been a change in the law, and that the municipality can, you know, determine the speeds on some of their streets. And so this street should be 25 to 30 miles an hour all the way from Washington all the way up to Redwood, at least for those huge trucks. So that's pretty much all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Next, Bruce Grant.
With you. Unfortunately, Bob, I disagree with you. And I live in Petaluma Estates also, but then I'm not that close to McDowell. And I have.
I am right backed up to Petaluma to the road. So
yeah, no wonder. Yeah, I can understand what you have to deal with. But unfortunately, this North McDowell is the only arterial multi-lane road east of 101. And there's not sufficient entry and exit points to 101 for people to use it instead. If you want to go anywhere between East Washington and Old Redwood Highway. Even the Rainier undercrossing, it looks like it's not going to be intersecting with the highway itself with 101. There won't be any entry or exits at that point. Anyway, that's a problem. So, but I am against any speed limit changes. The speed varies from 40 to 30, depending on where there's the most pedestrians and traffic and retail. And I think it's pretty darn reasonable. And I'm sorry that there's a lot of people who disagree with me, but there are also, realize a lot of us can't ride bikes. My wife is disabled and at 77, I no longer feel comfortable riding a bicycle in traffic, even though I used to ride it a lot when I was in college and later. So that's another thing. One of the things that drives me crazy is there is no, I'm sorry, senior moment. I can't remember what I was going to say. Okay. I agree with Nancy Chin Erickson about putting in a right turn lane at Corona, northbound North McDowell. I've seen that happen a lot. Whenever I'm driving north there and don't want to turn right, if I've stopped at the light, I still make sure I get as far to the left as possible so people can get by. But a lot of people don't think about that. So let's see. Oh, this is really crucial. Okay, Petaluma Estates is a seniors mobile home park. We've got a lot of people who are, reaction times are not as good as they used to be. I know it's happening to me. And a left turn out of the north driveway, which is the only driveway where you can turn left out of Petaluma Estates, on the in the divider, there should be an entry lane so that people can, get across southbound lanes and then sort of wait on that entry lane if necessary, or merge more easily. Okay, that's all I've got to say. I don't want to waste anybody's time. One other thing is I agree with everything said about minimizing climate change. My wife and I recently bought a plug-in hybrid EV. So we're all in favor of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. And just a reminder to everybody, I know it can be hard when you're on the spot and speaking in front of a bunch of people. So if anything slips your mind, go ahead and put it in the chat, or if you're not comfortable speaking up, just put it in the chat and we'll record it and review it just like these spoken comments. So George Ellison next.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to address long range plan. I'm sure David's already on this, but I think everybody has seen situations where we've repaved highways like this and then immediately turned around and dug them up to put new sewers and whatever into the latest development. Hopefully the city has looked ahead at this and that we've got the infrastructure under that road before we start spending money beautifying it. That said, I'd also like to be sure that we're looking at the situation where we've got I think it's been pointed out a couple times, Eli Road and McDowell are often working in conjunction with each other. And if we slow down McDowell too much, it's going to push more traffic onto Eli. which is going to exacerbate the situation at Eli and Redwood Highway, which drastically needs to have the light that's been planned for years put in. And that said, I firmly believe that both of those roads are traveling a little quick right now, quite a bit quick right now, and need to be slowed down. So I'm in favor of using bike lanes, which are going to be more and more necessary as time goes on here, as we get more people on electric bikes, et cetera. Pedestrian walkways and so on, designed into this to throttle back people driving. The other thing that I would highly recommend is crosswalk up by the brewery. I suspect we get a lot of visitors from the South Bay who come up to go to Lagunitas and then walk across the street there to visit the distilleries and so on down the road across the way. So I think that's a real safety issue. And I appreciate the time. Thank you for putting this on.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, George. Teddy Herzog.
Hello, everybody. I live on the west side and I drive over to Friedman's quite a bit as a guy who remodels houses. So I feel comfortable and it's easy to drive, at least that portion of North McDowell for me. But when I'm not working, I do like to spend a lot of time walking and bicycling. Being on the west side, I'll take the Lynch Creek Trail over. And I do like to walk around town just to see what it feels like to walk different neighborhoods. I like to bicycle around town to see what's going on. And the few times that I've walked the length of North McDowell, honestly, I've had my noise canceling headphones on and loud music because it's pretty intense. And I agree with the idea that it would be nice to slow down traffic on North McDowell just because of that intensity and because of the safety. As someone who will bike ride in a lot of places that people consider to be unsafe and uncomfortable, the truth is I have not bike rode up North McDowell the length of it just because it's too unsafe. And there's just, for me, it'd be crazy to ride up and down there because there's you're in the middle of the traffic. I want to promote the idea that others have already mentioned that we need to begin transitioning to other modes besides just the automobile. And so every step we take from here, really, it's important that we add in to the best of our ability, bicycle facilities and encourage walking. And my last point is the East Side Smart Train Station. Although in the past, some people have talked about it as, a park and ride train station, a big parking lot. And yes, it can be that. We really have to think about and add in the ability for bicyclists to get there from all directions, and for people to not only be able to walk there, but to want to walk there. And so in summary, anything we can do and everything we can do to make McDowell more walkable and more bicyclable, I strongly support that. Thank you.
Excellent, thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Teddy. Eli Davidian.
Hey there, Eli Davidian. I live here on the east side. I work on the east side as well. First of all, I just want to say thank you guys for putting this on. And I think David Parisi did a great job of characterizing the existing conditions. I bike commute, like I said, I bike commute between my home and office pretty regularly. I'd say that due to the speed of traffic for future bike lane planning, I think it's pretty essential to have at least a double stripe separation, if not bollards. I understand that, the separated path is expensive and, there may not be space in some areas, but I do think that, just looking at what happened over at Lagunitas with the with the separated path there. It's really nice. I actually will divert onto that separated path if I'm biking. I'll leave the bike lane and get on that path because it's just a lot more comfortable to bike along that area. So, you know, if you know, costs or constraints now, if it can't be implemented now, maybe future plans can say, you know, implement piecemeal as funding becomes available or as sites redevelop, things like that. That would be a suggestion. I've heard talk about connections to the smart station, which I think is great. There's also the smart path that's planned along the rail line. And I think we really need to integrate with that, even though it's not built yet. I think there could be wayfinding, signage, and other ways to integrate with that, because that'll be a regional bikeway. And so, you know, future planning of this segment of roadway will need to integrate with that regional bikeway. Similarly, there's a push for denser development around the smart station. I've heard that this, you know, there's a residential development being proposed there. There's the Brody Ranch that's just been developed. That's hundreds and hundreds of people. So, you know, while the existing conditions characterize existing use, we should not be planning necessarily for existing use, but also thinking about what our future land uses are going to look like and what kinds of demands we're going to have from the people who are moving into these areas and where they're going to need to move and how they're going to move. So I would suggest that we consider those future land uses, those future development pressures, and, you know, anticipate those and plan for them in our future plans. I guess I just have one question, which is, will there be a plan that will be put out for the public to review and comment on? And maybe you said that already, but apologies if I missed it. And that's all for me. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Eli. David, were you speaking? Sorry, I thought I saw your mouth moving. You're muted.
Thank you. I'm the worst at this sometimes, but we'll address a bunch of the questions at the end during a wrap up. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next, Barry. Barry, how do you pronounce your last name?
Busowitz.
Busowitz. Okay, thank you.
No, thank you, Ingrid. I'm Barry Busowitz. I'm really grateful for this meeting tonight. The conversations we're having here are one of the reasons that I'm willing and eager to engage in my community, and I'm enlivened by it. I thank you, the city, the staff, the consultants, and David Parisi. I agree. Your factual presentation of the current condition was a very good factual presentation, and lacks my more passionate subjective feelings about it, and that's appropriate. And I'm grateful to all the participants. I began making a list of the things you all mentioned and your names to thank you specifically, and it's too much. I don't want to take that much time, so thank you. And I endorse virtually all the specific things that people with more experience on North McDowell than I have mentioned, but I also agree with Teddy. I ride my bike a lot. I love riding my bike around Petaluma, and I have never ridden the full length of North McDowell. I've avoided it as much as I could because, you know, it's an insult to the human right of people being able to move about in their community, to walk or bicycle, and even for cars. You know, I'll repeat this. I think that street is an insult that should never have been built that way, and that needs a complete revamping and reconsideration. And that's why I like the conversation so much tonight, because it addresses this in large scale and small scale. The most endangerment I have ever experienced riding my bike in Petaluma is going for healthcare, because I go to the Petaluma Health Center and I ride my bike, and I think about it for weeks ahead of time if I'm going to do that. If the pedestrian and bicycle people who use North McDowell don't need buffers, they need separation. Otherwise, it is inappropriate, wrong, dangerous to even use that street for pedestrians and bicycles. I've walked it and I've ridden it. Not the whole thing at once, but all of it at some time or another. The highlights I have in my recommendations are canopy trees. If we were required or decided to or committed to putting canopy trees on almost all of that boulevard, that would provide an infrastructure design that could resolve many or all of the other problems. 10-foot wide lanes would also be helpful for doing this. A 25-mile-per-hour speed limit. I know, thank you, Bruce Gant, for advocating your view that we shouldn't lower the speed limit. I appreciate that. And it's one of the reasons I value this conversation. I'm pretty sure that we can address the needs and values that you addressed, Mr. Gant, even if we do lower the speed limit. And without lowering the speed limit, we're endangering everybody who uses the road. Perhaps accepting if there are physical barriers between bikes and pedestrians and cars. But I think that it might, anyway, so I still think that a lower speed limit is better. We've had some postings in the chat that address this effectively, I believe. And I would also recommend finally that we strongly consider, if not commit to a lane reduction from a 4-lane road to a 3-lane road. And I appreciate, and I'm so delighted that the Petaluma Boulevard South Road Diet has started. I think that we'll like it. I think even the people who don't think they like it will appreciate it and get benefit from it once it's made. Thank you very much again to all of us and all of you.
Okay, thank you, Barry. Next is Dwayne. Dwayne, if you'd still like to speak, it is your turn, and you are muted.
There. Okay. Good evening. Yes, I want to say been a lot of good suggestions, and I especially like the reduction of the speed limit. But I wanted to mention that for Corona Station to be successful, we need to have access to both the industrial park by people who are riding the train. We need sidewalks both to the industrial park section. We need, of course, sidewalks to get to the health center. And we need sidewalks to get to Lagunitas. We will need places where people can cross the road, where they were talking about traffic calming and proper signage, proper safety for people crossing the road. And if this is going to be in the vicinity of a pedestrian community. And so I think those things are necessary for having a successful rail station there, as well as the people biking and just enjoying the whole community. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dwayne. Next, Neil/Rob.
Hi, my name is Rob Sky. Actually, it's a shared computer. So I would like to also emphasize that other people have mentioned across from the 2 mobile home parks where there are about 400 families, a crosswalk maybe near the tracks so people can get to the other side. Currently, to get there, you have to go down to either the bank, Wells Fargo, or up to Corona Road. Trying to cross Corona Road is very dangerous. People do not slow down for the red light. They just swing right around. They make the right turn without even slowing down. And they often don't see the pedestrians. I see people often almost getting hit trying to cross that street. The sidewalks are very narrow. When you're trying to walk, you have trucks barreling along about 2 feet from you. And even though the speed limit is 40, they're doing in the mornings and evenings, they're going easily 60 miles an hour. So the speed limits, even though it's 40, it's not enforced. Again, on the northern part, the sidewalks on one side, and then you have to cross over to the other side. You can't walk even to the post office safely from the 2 mobile home parks, and it's not that far. So I appreciate everything you're doing. And even though it was low on the list, it does have to be resurfaced. It's like driving on a washboard. So appreciate everything you're doing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next is Clifford Hardy.
Thank you, Jessica. I won't take up too much time because I'm mostly going to be rehashing some of the points that have already been made. I am someone that commutes daily down North McDowell Boulevard from Midtown Petaluma to the business park off of Old Redwood Highway. And I am essentially the perfect candidate for bicycle commuting. But what stops me from that is the dangerous conditions on North McDowell Boulevard, especially between Corona and Old Redwood Highway. If anything could be done to make this stretch safe, not only would I bike, but I think a lot of other people would start biking and biking to work, taking cars off the road, making local pollution better. And just this is not a data-driven point, but it's just a personal anecdote. But in my year of commuting on this stretch, I've never seen anything on McDowell Boulevard even approximating traffic congestion. So I don't really see any issue with reducing the number of lanes. I don't think it would cause significant delays in people's travels. I think it could make things safer, and it's really kind of a win-win-win situation. We can make it safer for bicyclists, make it safer for pedestrians without really too much of any sacrifice from drivers. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Clifford. Bill Reinhardt.
Hi there. Thank you. Yeah, first, I just want to start by thanking you again for undertaking this project. When I first moved to Petaluma, I worked along this stretch, and I often rode my bike to work. I couldn't believe that such a broad stretch of pavement could feel so unsafe to ride along. And also, you know, it has giant landscape frontages, but no sidewalks and very few street trees. So while I fully support most of the goals you've listed, I agree with the previous speaker that I've never noticed congestion on North McDowell, but if others who were there more have, then I can't argue with them. But I want to add one thing that really wasn't mentioned in the toolbox, which is to add street trees and just more trees in general. This has been a recurring theme in the ongoing general plan update workshops, so I need to speak on this. Yeah, I won't go into all the ways that trees can help with traffic calming or improve walkability or the other community benefits trees provide. But I just need to ask that you please consider adding trees as a key program element. Yeah, with all the variety of conditions and issues you've got to address here, I know that this is a big ask and it won't be easy, but you know, maybe you do need lane reductions to create medians and parkway strips and separated pathways, and maybe we'll need to work with adjacent property owners to add trees in the frontage landscapes. You know, I think there are going to be a variety of ways to do this, but knowing that you have your hands full meeting all these goals, I just wanted to cast a vote for adding trees. And thank you again.
Thanks.
That's it.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Bruce, I see you have your hand up. I think I'm going to skip and go to Marcia and Fred Tar and then Beth, and then we'll come to you just to give everybody a chance to speak once before we do second turns. So Marcia and Fred Tar, and excuse me if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly.
No, that's totally correct. Thank you so much. I'm a member of PBAC, and we have been talking about North McDowell. I don't know, it seems like forever, for at least the last 2 years. We've talked about planning. We see the plans every once in a while as they slowly crawl along. And I cannot tell all of you enough how much we, as part of PBAC, appreciate all of these comments tonight. Everything you've said resonates with us because we've been talking about it until we're blue. But it's lovely to have an audience who agrees that North McDowell really can become so much better. And we have that opportunity. Mr. Parisi, I can't wait to work with you. City of Petaluma, thank you so very much for putting this on. I agree with almost every comment I heard tonight. I don't want to go through one by one as Barry had suggested that we could do. But again, thanks so much for everything that you do, City of Petaluma. Mr. Parisi, thank you for the presentation. And the people who have attended, you are, I'm in awe of you. Thank you for taking, and staff, pardon me, and city staff as well. Thank you so very much. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Beth P.
You caught me with a class. Thank you so much. First of all, I wish to apologize because I did come late to the game, so I've missed most of the presentation. I'm addressing you with not only experience as a Golden Gate Transit bus driver, that I've spent a lot of time driving both east and west side of town with a 45-foot commercial bus. I'm also retired and I currently live in the Youngstown Mobile Home Park. So a few points that come to mind just from my experience of experiencing changes that have been made to other streets and so forth. To start with, is there any way that the pavement can be made thicker than what it currently is to accommodate the weight of commercial vehicles? Because you do have a lot of trucks that have a huge weight load, and if the pavement is not thick enough, then that's just going to turn around and cause potholes that are going to constantly tear up everybody's suspension. So that's point number one. Number two, I do not agree with the idea of cutting down lanes. And I'm saying this from experience of driving South McDowell when that was changed to the traffic calming, not only the cutting down a lane, but also the inclusion of a traffic circle. Please, please, please don't put any traffic circles in. They're a nightmare. Furthermore, by cutting it down to one lane, that actually just causes more frustration for people that are trying to commute. And an observation that I have is this stretch of McDowell all the way down, as well as several other routes throughout the city, become alternate routes when the freeway gets backed up. And yes, the freeway is widening right now, but we still have more and more houses being built, not only within this community, but also in communities north of us, and people that are going to be moving farther north because they can't afford to live in San Francisco. Anytime they hit Petaluma and it turns into a parking lot, then people start looking for alternate routes to try to get down farther. And McDowell turns into 101 north or 101 south, depending on which way the commute runs. So it's actually going to be more beneficial to have two lanes, because by having two lanes, you can accommodate more traffic. Also, from a bus driver's point of view, I'm specifically referring to South McDowell. When you're at the point whereabouts where the ballet school used to be, and when I was driving the evening commute, that's about the point where the traffic calming one lane splits and goes into two lanes. And the bus stop, quote unquote, stop at that point, where I would drop off my clientele in the evening coming from San Francisco on my Route 76, it was hell trying to move back into that traffic, because that bus stop happened to be right at the point where the one lane went to two, and be damned if any private vehicle is going to let a bus driver pull out and get ahead of them in the traffic. So if there's some way that you can help the bus drivers, who in turn, if the bus drivers can move along with the flow of traffic, if not faster than the flow of traffic, if there's good bus service, that's going to encourage people to ride public transit more. And it's difficult as a bus driver when you have people in their private vehicles, where it's difficult to try to merge back into traffic. So take a look at that particular point where the one lane turns into two lanes on northbound South McDowell. And if you can just observe the buses in the evening commute trying to merge into traffic at that particular point, it would have been so much easier if that bus stop was where there were two lanes instead of one. Next point is, as a resident of the mobile home park at Youngstown, we have a little bit of a center divide area, but it's not a dedicated center divide lane. And I think it would be really beneficial for the congested homes, the mobile parks, and the areas where you have apartment complexes and so forth, if there is a center lane there where cars can pull into the center lane so they can make it halfway across the street before going into the other traffic, because the traffic is vicious sometimes, and it's very, very difficult to try to get across the traffic and then into the oncoming traffic. That's just a whole lot of traffic up in that area during the commute hours. So to have a brake lane in the middle for somebody to go for before trying to get into that other lane would, I think, be very beneficial and take the stress off, especially for elderly people. The elderly people are going to have difficulty, speaking in general, elderly people aren't quite happy with heavy traffic in the first place. Then we get to the issue of crosswalks and pedestrian usage, I like the fact that our city has crosswalks with the flashing lights. And I think that that would be beneficial to have those flashing lights at every crosswalk that gets put in, because it just wakes up people who are so busy multitasking when they're behind the wheels of their cars, that they're paying attention to their cell phone and their computer. And then all of a sudden you have flashing yellow lights. It wakes them up to the fact of, oh, hey, yeah, here's a pedestrian. And it's very beneficial to have those flashing lights on crosswalks, especially when it's evening. And a lot of times you'll see people out walking wearing dark clothing. You can't see them. When we get to the area where the mobile home parks are, definitely put a crosswalk in that area, because you have elderly people that rely on public transit. And as has been mentioned by other people here, you get to where Youngstown is, and then there's the Petaluma Estates right adjacent to Youngstown. What if you put a crosswalk right between those two mobile homes, again with the flashing lights, and have bus stops right there next to the crosswalks? And that will be very beneficial for the elderly people of the community. Then getting to creating the bus stops, so you're helping your drivers and taking the stress down on your public transit drivers, which it's tough to get people to drive buses in the first place nowadays, to create bus stops where the bus can actually pull out of the traffic so they're not blocking any of the lanes, because motorists get very irate at a bus that is blocking their progress, even if they do have an adjacent lane that they can shift over into. It's just a lot easier if the bus driver has enough room to move over and make sure that there is enough room for the bus to get out of the lane of traffic. When I was driving in San Francisco on Mission, it's an absolute joke, the diamond lanes down there that are supposed to be for buses, because the way that they have cars parked along the street, the diamond lane is not even wide enough to accommodate the bus. So for it to be a bus only lane and the bus can't fit into it, it kind of defeats the purpose. So address that when you're creating the bus stops.
Thanks.
Also, for your people who are sitting and waiting for the bus, how long service do they have before the bus comes around? I think it's every half hour. So create bus shelters that actually shelter the people. If you look at what we have at the main bus terminal that's down there next to the train station, if you've actually waited for a bus there in the wintertime, there's really not much shelter there. It looks pretty, but it's not effective. Then, let's see, bus stops where the bus can pull out of the lane, shelters at the bus stops. And then the issue of bikes. I think it's awesome to have the thought in there to protect bike riders. Perhaps a good way to protect the bike riders would be to create bike lanes along pedestrian walkways, rather than having the bikes actually on the street sharing with motor vehicles. Is it possible perhaps to widen the sidewalks and create bike lanes so that people can be riding their bikes and pedestrians could also be in the area, but make it wide enough so it's easy enough for bicyclists to go around people who are walking? I guess that's about it that I have for my thoughts right now. Thank you very much for listening to us, and I appreciate that you have put this up for us. I'm going to hush right now so that other people can talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth.
Thanks, Beth. Sheila Baker.
I think I also wrote some comments in the chat. We should work with SMART on those tracks. It is insane and crazy to expect to be in the road after crossing the tracks. So you either walk or walk your bike across the tracks, and I don't know how, but you end up in the middle of the road, just from crossing the tracks. So that is SMART, but you should also work with SMART on that to make sure every minute that exists is a bad minute. A pedestrian or bicyclist should not expect to land in the middle of the street. And then secondly, my comment was on the Sharrows. Well, Sharrows are class 3. No, please, no. Let's don't do Sharrows anymore in Petaluma. And someone mentioned the road diet in Petaluma Boulevard and the south is being planned. There will be a little bit of, there'll be a few, I guess some bits of class 3 sharrows on that Petaluma Boulevard South project. And I just don't think it should exist at all. On Petaluma Boulevard North, that's just about all it is. And it's just a failure. So no class 3 sharrows, please, none. And then, I think that's about, I wanted to say also, the idea of the sidewalk and the riding and bicycling is a little bit, maybe better than nothing, but it's awkward with intersections. So you're riding along and you stop and you have to push the button or whatever to get across the street. And I mean, it's just a little bit awkward. So that exists by Lucchese and beyond. And that's, in my humble opinion, a little bit awkward, but other bicyclists may like it. I don't know. But anyway, thanks for everything you do. Thank you for putting this on. You are wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sheila. Francesca Smith.
Hi, thank you so much. I wanted to say thanks to Ken for notifying me of this meeting. We corresponded a few weeks ago, and I'm sorry I've been late to the party here tonight. But I'm joining you from my office at 1341 North McDowell. I'm right between the shopping center and Hen House across the street from Lagunitas, and I have seen it all. I have just a few points to make, and I'm sure these have been made already, but pedestrians are my biggest concern. I see pedestrians darting across from one brewery to the other. I see elderly residents from the mobile home parks trying to just, jaywalk across McDowell to get to the bus stop, I'm assuming. And I also see families with strollers and young children in the roadway, making their way from the health center, maybe to the shopping center or vice versa. And this really has me concerned. I heard a crash outside my office a couple of years ago, and a young driver with a car limped into my office and said that he had been broadsided by a driver who turned out to be intoxicated coming from Lagunitas. Poor kid was just on his way home from work and wound up in a very traumatic situation. The Lagunitas truck traffic is something that I'm particularly concerned about. Can it be mitigated? 5 or 6 trucks are in the left turn lanes at any given morning, with a dozen other trucks in the new parking lot. Is there some way to work with Lagunitas about scheduling and logistics so that we don't have this line of trucks impeding any of our opportunities to make a left turn to get into our work locations? I would like to see some of the signage that's along McDowell moved back away from the roadway for clear visibility of entering and exiting businesses. We actually wrote a letter to the post office when they put in their new sign, and we said, guys, this is so close to the roadway. When you're coming out of the parking lot, you can't even see what the traffic that's approaching. And the other thing that I'd like to mention is the bike paths. I would love to see bike paths, dedicated bike paths off the roadways. It's just a very busy, very fast-paced roadway, and I would like to protect our pedestrians and our cyclists. So I'm very excited about this initiative, and yes, we need something thicker to on the roadways to keep the roadways from getting so pockmarked. It's amazing. The city crews are doing an amazing job of trying to keep up with the potholes, but it's whack-a-mole. So thank you so much for this initiative.
Okay, thank you, Francesca. So I don't see any additional hands raised. Is there anybody else who would like to speak? If so, please raise your hand now. And if you don't feel like talking, but you want to share something, again, just please put it in the chat. You just click on the chat button at the bottom center of your screen and then type and hit enter.
I see a couple of hands up, Ann and Steve. Yeah, Ann, you want to jump in? You're going to have to unmute though.
Yeah, thank you for calling. Well, I live on Wood Sorrel and travel on this boulevard quite often. I find it extremely dangerous. It should have been upgraded to 21st century safety features 20 years ago. So at night, I cannot tell what lane I'm in because of lack of paint to distinguish the lines on the lanes. That's an easy fix. And then just for pedestrians, doesn't affect me, but pedestrians from the medical clinic at 1179, they have no way of crossing if they are coming by bus to get to the other side to go in another direction. And then there's a couple of other businesses too, but just pedestrians, forget it. And in terms of bicycles, I never see bicyclers on this street or on this boulevard. They're going around to better areas. This is too dangerous for them. And I think that's it for me. But in terms of the time frame on this, I hope that we can get at least some lines painted on the lane change before the end of 2022, because this is like an accident just waiting to happen. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Anne. I'm not seeing any other hands raised on my screen. Ingrid, are you seeing any others?
No, they're just physically raising their hands. And
Oh,
I
I'm sorry. I don't see you.
video.
Okay.
So Steve, I think you wanted to raise your hand too.
Yeah, thanks for putting on this presentation. There's been a lot of great input, and I'm going to try not to repeat a lot of it. But there was one that I've seen, I've heard of several times, and I've also seen it in the chat, and that's the need for street trees. I'm a landscape architect by profession who's worked on a number of street tree projects all over the state, and I can tell you that the street trees are a great traffic calming device, and they help the streets look really good. And I also want to let you know that there is a tool in the city that can help you with that. I used to be a member of the Tree Advisory Committee, and when I was chair of that committee, we did a number of street tree projects all over the city of Petaluma, mostly downtown. And so I'm not going to repeat a lot of other comments, but I do have a comment for the traffic consultant. And there's been a number of comments about slowing down traffic, eliminating lanes, and whatever you might do. And perhaps I missed the information, but is there any data that tells you what happens when you reduce one lane from 4 to 3, or if you reduce the traffic speed from 35 to 25, you know, what happens? Does the stacking increase at each intersection? And then also the other issue that I'm interested in, what has the widening of 101 North in particular, has that helped with anything? Because I remember in the old days, when it was only 2 lanes, you could look over there and you could see how traffic was so bad that you go along McDowell to not be stuck on the freeway. So I'm just curious if there's any data that would help you in your solutions for reducing speeds or reducing lanes or adding traffic calming elements that would help you with widening the road for the traffic, for the bicycle lanes that people would like, and then also sidewalks that are ADA compliant. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. We can briefly address that if there's time near the end, some of those questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Steve. And then James Rafe, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. I joined late, and I am one of the very few that commute on North McDowell with a bike, and it's scary, especially the smart lane, and using a pedestrian or sidewalk option would be even worse. I, like most people driving their cars, are just trying to get to work. So that's all I had to say, and thanks for taking my comment.
Okay, thanks, James. And Beth.
Yes, I'd just like to mention, because I'm approaching this from not only being a long-term resident of Petaluma. I've lived here since 2001, so I've seen a lot of changes, but also the fact that I've driven public transit through Petaluma, not only the basic service of the 80 route, yes, if you can remember the 80, but I've also driven the 74, the 72, and the 76 route. So I spent a lot of time in Petaluma traffic, as well as communities north-south from Santa Rosa all the way down to San Francisco. I've been in all kinds of situations. I've seen what works, what does not work. I would like to volunteer to be able to help you folks with whatever my knowledge of my 29 years of driving professionally can help you, because I can share with you a commercial driver's perspective as well as a resident's perspective. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Beth. All right, I don't see any other hands raised physically or electronically. So with that, David, I'll hand it back over to you.
Thank you. And thanks, everybody. I'm really thrilled with the feedback we got tonight. It's tremendous. I was keeping count of the folks that were participating. At one point, we were almost at 60 people, and we're still at 44. So that's amazing. So thank you very much. We got great feedback. I'm going to recap some of it and also answer some questions, and then also talk about next steps. Okay. I'm going to try not to repeat myself, but we took a lot of notes. Our team did, and we'll compile these. And if I missed anything, I'm sure we'll grab it. Boy, the feedback we heard varies from there's a lack of crosswalks, additional turning lanes are needed, like a right turn lane Corona, some of the left turn lanes. Speeds are high, slow down traffic. The pavement is in cruddy shape, fix it. We need to shift the modes and more to less from cars to meet some of the climate goals, make the street more inviting for pedestrians and bicyclists. Heard a lot of folks talk about the advantages of tree plantings, some questions about converting, reallocating the number of lanes on the street. Folks identified some of the tools that we didn't have time to talk about tonight, but are definitely on the table. Things such as separated bike lanes, which are also called Class 4 bikeways. Heard a lot about big trucks beating up the street, vibrating, people feeling in their homes. Desire to reduce the speed limit on the street. Some other people were against speed changes. And this is what happens. We get different views. It's fantastic. When we're doing long-term planning, make sure we don't have to rip up the street right away. You know, coordinate with utility companies, coordinate with the future smart station to make it easy to walk and bike to it. I think heard over and over, you know, be cautious on how we phase this project. We know that the first phase is pavement. Let's not preclude some of these other ideas over time. So do careful planning. Heard about a need for better wayfinding and signage. Also about maybe moving some signs back. Maybe there's some sign pollution on the street. Need bike separation, not just stripes. Some folks know about the advantages of narrowing lanes, which can reduce speeds. Heard also about crosswalks near mobile home parks. Some folks talked about how narrow some of the sidewalks are, others where the gaps are in the sidewalks, that identified those as impediments. Street trees, yes, good street trees do offer the traffic calming advantages. Got some good feedback from Beth about driving a 45-foot Golden Gate coach, the need for good pavement design. We got to consider bus operations to really invite, you know, transit riders. Let's see, a few more things. No sharrows. People probably wonder what the heck are sharrows? Those are shared lane use arrows that really tell a car or motorist and a bicyclist they're to share a lane, also known as Class 3. But we've heard several people say no sharrows, please. And good comment about the visibility of the lane lines. They've faded. Make them pop so people really can see them. But overall, we're very, very thrilled. I also there were some comments a lot of comments on the chat room. And again, we're going to record all those. And some of those that were slightly different than the ones that were spoken about during public open time here. Is this meeting being recorded? Yes, it is. If you want to hear yourself again, or just re-listen to the whole meeting and get all the feedback, it is being recorded. We'll give you the web address in a minute. Other chat comments were we should expect less traffic when 101 is widened, less traffic on the arterial. That is, there's high noise levels. There's a question about when do these road diets work? That's on the chat, and I think a couple people asked that, and I'll address that real quick. So road diet is typically when you go from 4 lanes to 3 lanes on a roadway. And generally, when you're at the traffic levels we are now at with North McDowell, they can cause a lot of spillback and congestion because 20,000 cars is really the absolute maximum limit that we're seeing for implementation of road diets. And a lot of it has to do with how intersections operate, but it's something we will, I'm sure, address as part of this project. And there's other folks in the chat room say, hey, be careful you take away lanes because of emergencies. Some other chat comments were fix the railroad crossings. They're uneven. They're uncomfortable. There's some trip hazards. It's tough to get in and out of some of the mobile home parks. A goal to make it safer, make this whole street safer for seniors walking along and crossing the street as well. And then Steve, you also had a question about speeds and reductions and, after effects. Streets like this, the traffic levels, there's ways to reduce the speeds and maintain the same capacity or as much traffic as this roadway is carrying. We do have after studies where through lane narrowings and other features, we can reduce this average speed by 3, 4, or 5 miles an hour. But what we're seeing is really important is to really reduce those outlier speeds, the people that are coming out down the street at 60 miles an hour or 50 miles an hour. What can we do? We really want to address that to get everybody flowing pretty consistently. So those are some of the things we're going to look at. I know there's other comments. We'll recap all of it, but my gosh, we got a lot of really good feedback tonight. So if you don't mind, I think I'll just go over next steps because we're kind of nearing the end hour here. Yep. And fill you in on what we're thinking about some of the next steps.
Okay, bye.
All right, next slide. Possibly the last slide. So we got a lot of good feedback tonight, and we're going to spend some time going through all of this and seeing what we can possibly incorporate into that phase 1 of the project, and what elements can we think about for the future that would not be precluded. So that's going to be really key for the phase 2 of the project and for future phases. There was a question asked about when we were going to come back to the public, and I think we'll just we're going to powwow and figure out how to do that if we have another meeting like this or if it's before the city council, and to keep folks informed. And I'll turn to our team here also. I think in the website we'll keep that up to date, right, Ingrid?
Yeah, I was going to say, anyone who wants to get direct notices about any changes, any new information, go to cityofpetaluma.org/McDowell. There's a form, it's a small form. It just, you can provide your name, your email, and that will give us a list so that as things progress, we'll probably send out some emails to let folks know. If there's any hearings coming up, we'll send that out as well.
Excellent. Yeah, so because the idea is on the first phase of the project, which has the funding, is to try to get this designed this spring and bid the first element out. Again, to not preclude some of the great ideas, we'll continue to seek funds for other improvements, but get construction, at least phase 1 pavement work and some amenities as we can by late summer of this year. So that's the plan, and we're going to sharpen our pencils to see what we can get into this phase 1 plan and what can be considered for the future phase 2. So that's it. City folks, anything else we want to end with? I think there's one more slide maybe about the website address. Here we go. Yeah, if folks here want to provide more information or feedback, please check out the website, cityofpetaluma.org/McDowell. And as Ingrid said, there you can add more feedback or just keep an update. We'll update you on the status of the project. So with that, thank you guys. It's been a lot of fun, great input. Really appreciate it. This is a really well attended workshop, and we're very grateful for your thoughts. So good evening.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night, and thanks for all your time tonight.
Thank you.
And our city team, I'm going to send out a quick Teams email for a debrief. If anyone can do that, I'll send it out now. Thank you.